Welcome back to Arise Entertainment 360, where we're joined by actor Jeffrey Wright. So let's take us back to in your history a little bit. You were born in Washington, D.C.
I was.
And what were you like as a kid? I hear you were quite the mimic.
Oh, yeah. I was the guy who would be found in the hallways of his school, impersonating, shall we say, various teachers and coaches, much to the enjoyment of my classmates. But I didn't do any acting, formal acting until I got to college. I guess when I grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C. But I went to school in Northwest D.C. in a predominantly white school, but growing up in a prominently black environment. So
at St. Albans, which is a very prestigious school in D.C.
Yes, it was until I got there. It was indeed. It did manage to survive me, but yes. So I made that journey, daily from the time I was 9 years old. I used to go down to Southern Virginia, where my grandparents lived near the Chesapeake Bay down there. And in that environment, and I was very attuned to the language there. There was different language that I heard at St. Albans. There was language that I heard, in my neighborhood. So I was always one who was kind of sensitive to different behaviors, different gestures, and in order to kind of, ingratiate myself in these various environments. And so I think that played into my, my mimicry skills, if you will.
Was there any particular character or celebrity that you like to mimic and make fun of?
So celebrity when I was a kid
that we would know.
People used to ask me about, how did you prepare? I didn't make fun of, but how did you prepare to play Martin Luther King? I said, man, I've been doing Martin Luther King since I was a kid.
How does he sound?
Listening to his speech. Well, I'm not, come on.
He's like, I'm on the spot now.
Oh God, put me on the spot. But just listening to recordings of him as a kid. I used to try to capture his voice, and then they asked me to do it professionally years later. But I had a lot of rehearsal. There were a lot of folks that I used to admire.
So when you decided to go into acting in college, what made you decide to take that leap?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
But you didn't start acting until your junior year in college.
My junior year.
But then you ended up winning an acting scholarship to NYU.
Yeah, I took a class my junior year. I was a political science major. A friend of mine had taken this class, and they put on a show afterwards at the end of the semester, and I went to see it, and I said to myself, man, I can do that at least. And it had been kind of nagging at, the back of my head. So the next semester I took the class. And what was interesting about it was that the first day of the class, I knew that I wanted to do this for a while. It just felt like the right place for some reason. And then I came back home to D.C. after I graduated, and first gig was doing children's theater. Started small, ended up doing a play at the Arena Stage in Washington, one of the major regional theaters down there. Yeah. And the founder of that theater was a woman named Zelda Fitch-Handler, who also ran NYU's graduate acting program. And she said, you must come, give you a full scholarship, but come and get some proper training. And I did for all of 2 months.
And then you dropped out. Yes. Why'd you do that? Yeah. You had a full ride, and then you dropped out.
Well, because it seemed like a very safe environment. And the play that I had done at her theater was going to be done in Boston, and then was going to be done in New York, and so I thought that was a better way for me to learn my craft. And it was Lorraine Hansberry's last play, a play called Les Blancs, about this mythical African country that was undergoing this transition from colonialism to post-colonialism. And the part actually had been written for the director of the play. So it was very, I had a very close personal relationship with this piece, and I went off to do it. We didn't actually come back to New York, but I came back to New York with one of the guy who played my brother in the show, and I stayed here, and one thing led to another.
Turned out to be a great decision. In 1994, you starred on stage in Angels in America and won a Tony. My goodness.
Yes.
What was that like? I mean,
that was final validation.
Beginning.
That was final validation for my mother that I had actually, maybe chosen the right profession instead of going to law school. But that was, that remains like kind of the central performance and central experience for me as an actor, but also, in many ways as a human being, because it was such an extraordinary play, but also an extraordinary moment that was being captured. You had an HIV/AIDS crisis in this country that was not being recognized. People were suffering and dying in silence, and had an extraordinary political activist and an extraordinary writer in Tony Kushner, who, out of a sense of moral outrage, tackled this issue and encapsulated it, some aspects of it, in a 7-hour play. And so it was incredibly transformational for me. I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah.
A lot about my own biases, and had to overcome my own insecurities about, playing this high, extremely feminine character and revealing that. But at the same time, what I realized was that the essence of what this man was about was not the externals, but was rather that he was a caretaker. He was a former nurse. He was someone who was courageous, who was loving of his sick partners in time of need. So it was discovering all of those things that really were very meaningful for me, and I think meaningful for the audience when they came to to take this piece in.
Well, the play was so successful, but years later, Angels in America became a HBO miniseries. So tell us about winning the Golden Globe, then an Emmy for that role, and what do you think made it so resonate so deeply with audiences?
Well, I think for me personally, because I had a 1.5-year rehearsal on
Yeah.
Broadway prior to doing the movie, so I pretty much knew what I was doing by then. And it was weird for me actually winning the Golden Globe, winning the Emmy, because it was totally unexpected. I remember when I won the Golden Globe, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Because I never really felt that kind of welcome from Hollywood community, and so it was quite a shock, and but at the same time it was it was a wonderful validation of all the work that had been done, and as it turns out, most of us who were in the cast won that year because it's such extraordinary writing, and it resonated.
We've got to get to your charity work, but I want to ask you. You played Martin Luther King, Colin Powell, Muddy Waters, Basquiat.
Yeah.
Look at the wall, everybody.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Your favorite role?
My favorite role. My favorite role, I would have to say, just because it's the role that people know less than the others, is a role called Daniel Holt in a movie called Ride with the Devil, which was a Civil War movie directed by Ang Lee. It was the movie that he directed before Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and it's a beautiful movie. It's a little bit complicated because he's a freedman who's fighting for the Confederacy.
Oh.
And so there were some questions as to why, how can he be, he's on the wrong side, and so the studio didn't quite know what to do with this movie. That was one of the reasons why, and they kind of pulled it, from its release. But what was exciting to me about him as a character was that, yes, he was engaged, it was based on some historical figures. He was engaged on, the wrong side of history, but he emancipated himself. It wasn't about waiting for the great white savior to come down and say, okay, now you're free. He went on this journey that was very complicated and very difficult, but one that he forged with his own hands and on his own horse.
Now,
And so,
Jeffrey, they're telling us that we may have to wrap soon, so really quickly, tell us about your charity.
well, it's called Tie a Peace Foundation. It's the social development arm of a commercial entity called Tie-A-Line Resources. So we work in Sierra Leone, but it's through a hybrid of commercial and philanthropic investment.
And since we have to go, where can we find out more information
You
about
can go to tieapeace.org or tiealineresources.com to learn more. Go to tieapeace.org and you can pull down our project reports.
Thank you so much for your time and all your work.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Jeffrey.
You're watching
Thank you.
Arise Entertainment 360.